This is Stare Down the Bull. I'm your host, Susan Hunt. Around here, we tackle the hard stuff, how to lead with clarity, leveraging AI, and turn strategy into real results. My guest today brings a powerful perspective on how to do exactly that. Let's dive in. Welcome back to Stare Down the Bull. There's a version of success in sales we've all been sold. It's loud, high energy, it owns the room. And right now, with AI transforming the way enterprise teams plan, sell, and operate, that noise is everywhere. Everyone has a take, everyone is selling something. But what if the people who actually win in AI don't look like that at all? Today's guest, Jared Eisenlohr, is proof. He didn't come up through the typical path. He started managing some of the busiest chain restaurants in Las Vegas before moving into enterprise sales at Salesforce, Gartner, and LivePerson. He rode the full wave, hypergrowth, COVID-fueled demand for AI and call centers, the crash that followed, and he stayed through all of it. Now at Anaplan, he's applying those lessons to AI-driven enterprise planning, helping teams cut through the hype and focus on what really drives results. But what makes Jared different is how he shows up. He's not loud, he's not performative, he's steady, calm, and authentic. In a world chasing AI hype, he's built a career on cutting through it. So today we're talking about what it really takes to sell AI without the noise and what it means to truly stare down the bull. Welcome to the show. Thanks for joining, Jared. It's really great to see you.
Good to see you again as well, Susan.
Let's get into it. So you did come up through the traditional enterprise sales channels. You worked at a high volume Vegas restaurant, to Salesforce, to Gartner, and then LivePerson. What did those early experiences teach you about people and pressure that most sales reps never learn?
Yeah, I think people always expect maybe a more linear path into enterprise sales, but mine really started, like you said, running high volume restaurants and bars in Vegas, and you learn quickly that it's a people business.
Yeah.
So every shift, you're managing chaos, you're solving problems real time, you're making quick decisions, you're making sure every person in that room, customer, employee, feels taken care of. That's not so different than an enterprise complex deal, right? The pressure's different. The suits are a little bit nicer,
Yeah.
but the fundamentals are the same. Read the room, solve the problem, and it's usually best to stay calm. So that's how
Actually, managing the top Vegas restaurants is controlled chaos. And, how did it, I see how it shaped you because I've worked with you, so I get where that is. But explain for our audience how that shaped how you lead and sell today.
I think it's a good question. I think it rewired how I think about preparation and presence. I think in that environment, you can't really call a timeout. Things are live.
Yes,
Problems
right.
are happening in real time. And I think in a lot of ways, your teams are watching how you respond, right? And so I think that really trained me to think about how I stay calm under pressure, be quick to triage, never let them see you rattled, right? And
Yeah,
so I try to run my sales team today in the same way. Stay
yeah.
composed, solve the problem that's in front of you, um, and move, right? And defer to urgency. And when you're dealing with complex situations, those are likely to go a lot better if you're prepared for them, right? If
I
you
completely
got the
agree.
right people in place and you've got the right knowledge in the right hands of the right people, those tend to go. That chaos can turn into the controlled chaos, like
Yeah.
you mentioned. So
You probably don't know this, maybe you do, but when we worked together, when things were really, really going awry with the overall team, I would call you and I would talk to you about whatever was going on with you because it calmed me down. You're like this
sure.
steady state person. And even if you had bad news, somehow your calm demeanor still made it okay. My other leaders, a lot of them, they're all over the place if things were going bad, but I would call you and I would get all calmed down and then I could go reapproach whatever situation really needed to be handled
No, that's good to
uh,
hear. Yeah,
a
we
calm
certainly went
way.
through some times. No doubt about that. Yeah.
So, when you first moved to enterprise sales, what surprised you most about what actually works versus what you thought great selling looked like?
It I think when I moved into software sales is I think where the
Yeah.
biggest adjustment was. Certainly, there was a big adjustment into Gartner and the IT research aspect, but moving from there into software, I think was the biggest. I think the biggest disconnect was thinking sales was all about the product, and it's not always. Like it's still about
No.
people, right? And what carried over from previous careers is just the ability to stay present in a conversation, listen for what someone actually needs versus what they're saying, and then going back to the pressure, like we're never going to pressure is a privilege. You've heard that quote before,
Mhm.
and handling pressure without showing it. Most reps I've met had never really been, I think, in a high pressure environment before. I certainly hadn't in my time looking back at my time at Gartner, but I had been them and every weekend I felt like for years. And so moving from enterprise into enterprise software, I think it's not necessarily about what you're selling. It's how you're selling it, who you're speaking to, and then how you're able to navigate the challenges and getting them to find whatever that pain is that they're trying to solve for. That's ultimately what you're trying to uncover.
Yeah, it's about finding a solution to
Yeah,
whatever problem is at
that's
hand
it.
and pivoting at that
It's
moment.
almost
So,
sometimes painfully simple, right?
yeah,
Like if you find a problem that somebody's willing to solve and that person has the ability to make a decision to solve it, like you're in the right place.
yeah. Um, I mean, you went right into basically baptism by fire by going to Salesforce. It doesn't get more salesy than that. It doesn't get more high pressure sales than Salesforce. I mean, they really are. If you compare it to anybody else, they're pretty much a sales machine. So the good news is you got the most hyper type of environment out of your system right off the bat, and you had to learn how to sell really fast there. So this isn't one of my questions, but just tell me a little bit about that experience because I found it jarring and when I went to Salesforce and I had been selling for years and years and years and years, and I still found it jarring.
Yeah, I think I was fortunate in my first two stops after the restaurants and the bars were was Gartner first, and that was I still haven't seen a place that replicates the investment that they put into young professionals in their career learning how the fundamentals of selling.
Yeah,
It's a tremendous place. Even today, I see people with Gartner on their resume. I know there's a pedigree there that's been ingrained and good habits from the beginning. And so I was very fortunate to come through that environment. And
yeah,
then moving into Salesforce, you're right. It's a machine. It is high stress, high pressure. It's now, it's not tomorrow. Like it's very, very intense. But what I felt at Salesforce was that they had a really good they had all you had all the tools you needed. And sometimes you
yes.
just needed to make sure you were leveraging those tools correctly.
Mhm.
It was also the first environment that I had that actually had a f a well-functioning, intuitive CRM system, and
Right, well, they know how to use their
they
own
know how to
product.
do it,
Nobody
right?
else does.
Yeah. I latched onto that, and I
Yeah,
used those tools to my advantage, and so I actually ended up enjoying that atmosphere at Salesforce because yes, it was high pressure. Yes, it was stressful. Yes, we're moving fast, but everything it felt like control to it.
yes,
Much like going back early in my career, right? It wasn't the speed or the pressure that got to me at Salesforce. It was just the ability to actually use a CRM system for the first time that actually helped me drive my business. And I found like enjoyment out of that because it enabled
yeah.
me to look at the business in a different way and actually use technology to help me sell versus, you selling in spite of poor technology. So I think that was a big thing for me at Salesforce.
Yeah, I don't think people realize that Salesforce uses their technology pretty much in its purest form so that when there's a change, it upgrades and it does amazing things. And unfortunately, most of their customers do serious customization on their platform, which really limits the way that they can upgrade when new technology comes out. So it's kind of a stunning thing to see how it's meant to be, which is at Salesforce, and how it's meant to be used compared to how kludgy it tends to be at other companies because of customization and, not
Every
staying on top of things. It was a really cool differentiator. I'll never ever forget. I use Salesforce completely different now and discourage customization as much as possible
in
at any company.
everywhere I've gone since Salesforce, I guess 2 other stops, I guess, but it's been like, "What are we doing with this?"
Yeah,
It's like,
every time because they
"What the
do all
hell's
this funky stuff
that
and
was
then it
supposed to
doesn't
be?"
work the way it's meant to work. So
Yeah.
it was interesting. It was a really good experience, and that was controlled chaos. Salesforce, that's the best way to describe that entire company. It's completely controlled chaos, all every minute of every day. It
Yep,
was fun. So
yep.
then you went to Live Person, and you were there when it ran up from 15 to $70 a share. I was there too. What did hypergrowth feel like from the inside, and how did you separate real signal from hype during that period of time?
Yeah, I think live person, it was electric, we were real I went to my role at live person really believing in that mission, still do, right? It's the pain that's caused from having to call a 1-800 number for customer support. Nobody wants to do that. I'd rather do
Yeah.
taxes than that, right? So when the stock goes, from 15 to 70, I think everybody believes and turns about the customers like, oh, yes, this is exactly what we need to do. The energy's real. But I guess you learn to watch for the difference between momentum and then also fundamentals. And right. So AI was becoming very central to what we sold. And there was a temptation to let the hype sort of do the selling for you, right? Always try to anchor conversations into what customers actually needed, not what the narrative said that they should want. And so I think that
Yes.
discipline matters when things aren't going great and when they're hard, because we know that after that period of time, a, a there was a I guess, a chapter that wasn't so good, right? And we sort of got away from those fundamentals of what made us so successful. And so that period of hyper growth and energy and excitement turned in quickly to, all right, how are we going to manage through some of the crises, right? Because we did then have that after COVID, dip that we had to manage through. So I think the discipline was really what mattered. And I think we're talking about the moments, like separating real from hype. I like to ask a question like to myself. It's like, if AI weren't here, how would they need to solve this problem? And if there's
Right.
a real answer to that, a real pain, a real process that's broken, then what AI is doing is really accelerating that solution. Right. So that's signal, right? If the answer is we wouldn't really need to solve it, then you're really selling technology, not the outcome. And so
Yeah.
customers should feel that difference, even if maybe they can't articulate it. And so if that question just goes back to, if AI weren't here, how would we solve this problem? I think that's really where I try to separate the real from the hype in terms of AI.
I do want to go back to the COVID conversation because we were kind of humming along doing our thing and then COVID hit. And then all of our call centers were in crisis. Demand spiked. We had some leadership changes. You stayed through all of that. First of all, why did you stay through all of that? Because some of that stuff I left and stuff that happened after me with leadership was really, really hard. And what did that full cycle teach you? Because you went from, okay, it's 15 to kind of a steady state. Oh, we're doing great in the market. Our stock's at 70. Everything's cool. COVID hits. It becomes complete chaos. Pivots have to happen, right? We had to do a lot to get people, at home that were used to being in call centers and having technology to do that all over the world. And then there was, the company, I think, lost sight of core technology, and there was a big leadership shakeup. Just tell us about how you kind of view all of that, because you were one of the only people I know that actually was there through that entire process the whole time.
Yeah. I think I stayed because I was uh,
Yeah,
invested in the people, the mission, and what I was learning, if I'm being honest. So going through a full cycle like that, peak to near bottom, like teaches you things that you can't really learn any other way.
yeah,
For my job, like my team, or for my team, I guess the job was to keep them focused on what we could control. Um, the stock price and the headlines and all the leadership changes we went through, none of that really closes a deal. And so I just tried to be a steady presence in the room when everything around us felt a little unstable. Moments of doubt, certainly, but it was a great group of people, and you grow close to people that you've gone through those different cycles with. And so that was what allowed me to just stay focused and get through some of that. I think the resilience is really about. Let me start with what it's not about. It's not necessarily about being fearless. Um, it's not. It's more so about not letting the fear bleed into the people who are counting on you, right? And
mhm,
you can feel it internally, and you should. But your job is to keep the environment stable enough for your team to
yeah,
do their work. And these are these are real life experiences that you don't learn in business school. You don't necessarily learn, and some people may go through their whole career never having experience in something like that. And so I was embracing it for what it was, in that things weren't going well, but is it something that I can learn from? And I know, not that I want to be in a position like that again, but when I if I were to encounter that, I've been here before. I know what this is about. Like I can
yes,
help here. And I think what kept me grounded when when maybe things weren't going as well as we thought, or what we had hoped, was just transparency at full stop. When things are bad, you don't try to spin it. The moment you
yeah,
put a positive frame on something everyone knows or can
it's
see is
horrible.
a problem, you lose credibility,
Yeah,
and you'll
completely.
never get it back. And so I told my
Yeah,
team exactly, what I knew, I mean, within reason, and what I didn't know, and what we were going through, and reminded them we were going through it together, and that's it. Like,
yeah,
people don't
yeah,
people don't need you to have all the answers. They need to know, you're not going to bullshit them, and that's really what helped keep keep me and hopefully the others around me grounded during some of those tough years. Yeah.
you're known for being calm, steady, and authentic, so you were kinda like the perfect leader in that situation. I probably would have been much more hair on fire kind of a person during that situation, but
Uh,
you
my
also would have known from me where I stood.
my hair wouldn't be on fire. My head would be, but not my hair.
Sorry. Because you're so calm and steady and authentic, do you think that that's ever been mistaken for a weakness? And how do you win in a room full of louder, more performative personalities on the regular because you do?
Yeah, yeah. I don't know if it's been misread as a weakness. I think it's often misread as passive. So I think
Okay.
in rooms where people are loud and performing, you know, quiet can look like disengagement. But I've found that when things get hard, if a deal's falling apart or a customer's angry, people don't really want energy, right? They want steady,
Right.
right? They
Yeah.
want they want somebody who's steady, and so it they want someone who's been in chaos before and didn't flinch.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
so I feel like in a world where the 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 loud, charismatic, life of the party person sort of takes on this social ideal in a way, um, that those same things don't help when things aren't going well. No
Right.
one
Right.
wants somebody who's loud and charismatic in the life of the party when they need an answer to something. And so it's also coming back to, just being true to yourself. And so you don't want to be somebody you're not. That creates an environment that's can be pretty exhausting. And so it's So not so much weakness, but you've got to make sure people don't mistake you as being passive or disengaged, because that's definitely not the case.
Do you think yeah, I don't think that you are disengaged ever, and I also have never viewed it as a weakness, but, do you think that sales and we've had this conversation, do you think that sales overvalues, extroversion? What are we missing about what actually makes someone great? Because I do think that they most companies are like, "Oh, he's an extrovert, he's an extrovert, he's an extrovert," but you have a way of doing things that is basically completely opposite of that, and it really, really works. So what are your thoughts about
Y-
that?
Yeah, I'd add to that that I think the buyers have changed a little bit too. I think sometimes the buyers are burned out and
Yeah,
they're barraged by reps pushing the latest and greatest, and they can smell a performance from a mile away for the most part. And so what actually works now, I think, is getting in the room, making a real connection, setting the tone of partnership from the first minute of a meeting. And that we could call them introverted, we can call them ambiverted, omniverted, whatever you want to call that
yeah,
curious, deeply prepared rep, I think is really built for that moment. And I don't know that the performer or the person who wants to come in and charm and lean on that, over index on that, or lean on that. I don't think they're real prepared for that moment. And it's a really interesting phenomenon, because even when you're having internal meetings or you're meeting with your team, it's you're always going to have, let's just say for simplicity, half the room is going to be more in that I want to talk, I want to be engaged, I want to be, seen as the person that's, I don't not everybody puts on a show, but like the people
right.
who really are the ones that are going to do the most of the talking, right? And that can also be very authentic. So I don't want to say that that's not, but some people are just built differently. And then you've got the other half of the room that are maybe more on the, you know, curious, cautious, not cautious, but curious, sit back, strategize, analyze, that type of message. You get them in a room, what's going to happen is you're going to have this other side of the room that's going to not be shy at all about what they're thinking. And then you get this other side of the room that's not going to feel like they have room to talk. And so,
Mhm.
as a leader, you're in that room and you're really getting half of the team's opinions, because that's the only half that's talking. And so,
Yeah,
you
okay.
have to sort of take a step back and say, all right, I got that. I want to hear from this side. What are you thinking that you're not saying yet? And I think it's really important as leaders in this space to embrace both sides. And what's going to happen is, if we don't stop and like let everybody else kind of participate in a conversation or a topic, we're going to end up really just hearing half of the equation. And I think that's what a lot of salespeople really need to figure out, right? Is the same thing happens at a customer meeting. We don't always want to match a customer to a profile, right? We want to make
Mhm,
sure that we're matching somebody. If we have a customer that likes to talk, I want a rep that likes to listen
mhm.
and not just listen to respond, right? And so everybody has these different characteristics and the places where they're comfortable operating. And if some people are very comfortable operating in that environment where they're talking, some people aren't, right? And so we have to make sure we're not, to your point, over indexing on that extroverted social ideal that we seem to have,
Yeah,
especially in a sales environment, because selling's not about the performance. It's not about the, the, the presence that you have in a room necessarily all the time. It's about how well can you listen, connect, and get the customer to feel that you understand their problems and can help them solve it.
so this doesn't always match this type of thinking doesn't always match, like, the corporate narrative of what a salesperson is. Has that ever cost you? And I'm assuming it was, but was it worth it? Um, and we've had this conversation that, you're not passive, but you're chill, and you're not like this hyperactive salesperson, and that has been expected of you in some corporations. For sure, at Salesforce, that was expected of you. So how did you find your balance on all of that, and then to continue to be authentic with who you are?
I think I've been fortunate. I can't think of a time or point to a specific time where being authentic has cost me something, at least not something meaningful.
Hmm.
But I also think about it, if being authentic cost me something, was it really something I
Yeah.
wanted to win anyway, right? A deal built on telling people what they want to hear, to anything to close a deal, is a relationship that's, built on beach sand, right? And I'd rather lose the right way than win the wrong way, I guess, in some cases. Um, I've been also very fortunate to have leaders who have embraced that, who have found or appreciated at least that style. Because
Yes.
in aligning yourself with people who appreciate that style is important. And that's
Hmm.
part of, when you do look at taking a position, and who's my leader? Are they something that can embrace that style? Or are they somebody that's going to push me to be somebody that I'm not, because that's what fits their mold? And I've been
Yeah.
very fortunate, um, it really, excluding no one that I've worked for, past, present, and certainly hopefully in the future, doesn't understand and embrace the ability for me to be that way. And it's never really cost me anything that I've been like, man, if I'd only not been myself, I could have gotten that. I've
Yeah.
never had
Yeah.
that moment, you know.
I know. I talk in a few of these shows. I've talked about the fact that oftentimes I'm the person in the room that's saying what other people are thinking. Like nobody's saying it, but they're thinking, "Oh." And I've said to people like coming up through the ranks, like, just say the thing, because frankly, I got in trouble a few times, over the years, more than a few, I guess more than a few times. But did it matter in the end? Not really. Did it stop me or slow me down from my goals? No. So just do it. Just say the thing. And in your case, it's the complete opposite. Don't say the thing if you don't feel like it.
Well, but
I
that's
think the bottom line is be your authentic self all the time.
yeah, but that's the interesting part about this, though, is when it comes down to when something when the thing needs to be said, right?
Yeah,
That's not a moment that I would shy away from. If
correct. You
we're in
don't.
if we're in a debate, if there's, if there's something that's that I feel is really flawed about someone's thinking, and it's not that I disagree with them. I don't agree with everybody, but if there's something that's really flawed in what it's causing them to reach to a certain conclusion, I won't stay quiet on that.
Yeah.
And so what also happens then is people know when you do speak up in an environment of some kind, uh, you're really standing behind what you're saying. And so
Yes.
when things need to be said, they'll be said. And what you'll find is when the person who maybe doesn't try to monopolize a room starts to speak, everybody's like, oh, that must be a really important point.
That's actually really true, and I remember being in a lot of meetings with you with the other sales leaders where there were debates about whatever the topic was, and, I was listening to both sides, and I would turn to you, and I'd put you on the spot because I figured you would be like the voice of reason in some chaos, and, you may not have liked that, but I wasn't doing it to put you on the spot. I was doing it because I knew you had important guidance that would help me make whatever decision I needed to make in that room that I wasn't getting there with everybody that was saying the thing or talking
And
at
that
the
and that
time.
goes back
So,
to what we talked about before, is just having that recognition that
yeah,
we're only hearing one side. Let's take a minute.
yeah,
Let's make sure everybody has a chance to get those perspectives out.
right.
So looking back, certainly appreciate you doing that. Maybe I felt on the spot at the time, but ultimately what you're doing is like you're making sure that you have the opinions of all before a decision is made, which is smart.
Yeah. Well, it was more than that. It was like, help me get out of this circle of nonsense, please. What's the rational thing
Some of
that I
that
should be
too.
thinking about
There's
here?
some of that too. Yeah, totally get it.
We had fun. We had some really we
We
worked with
did.
some really
We
fun
did.
people.
Yeah, it was
Really,
a fun
really
time.
fun. So, you've gone from Vegas to hyper growth SaaS to AI driven call centers, and now you're at Anaplan. How has your approach evolved over all of those different environments? Do you feel you must feel different now than you did 10 years ago or 12 years ago? So tell us a little about that.
Um, I think everything I've carried forward comes back to a similar foundation, and that it's a people business. So the tools change, complexity might scale up, but the work is really still about understanding what someone actually needs and showing up as a partner, not a vendor, or a solution, but as a partner. And I think that lesson started in Vegas, as most lessons in my life, honestly, probably did. Both professionally
That's
and
the place to
personally.
learn everything,
Very
Jared,
good place to
honestly.
learn everything. But yeah, you come back and anchor to the fact that we're all people. Um, People buy from people. People want to be understood. They want to be heard. And despite the complexity or the tooling or whatever else comes in around us, that's still something that I think will resonate regardless of the audience. And so,
Yeah.
has my approach changed? Maybe a little, but that's one piece that I've been pretty core to throughout all the stops for sure.
Okay. Thank you for that. So the name of the show is Stare Down the Bull for a reason. In every career, there's a moment where pressure doubly hits or pressure and doubt hits really hard. What was yours? And I mean, it could be personal or some people share personal, some people share business. But what was your stare down the bull moment and how did you handle it?
I knew this question would be asked, so I had a chance to think through. I had a chance to
Good.
think through this, and there might have been a few options, but I think when I really look at where I was met with a fork in the road that really shaped my career, and I have a lot of people to thank for it, honestly. Um, it was Mine happened on a Friday morning. I had already accepted a job. I was living in Florida, and I was still in the bar restaurant business, and I had accepted a job going back to California. Um, Comfortable, some of the same concepts that I had worked for in Vegas, but this time in Orange County. Uh,
Yeah.
uh, Comfortable, fun, world I knew well, and I had developed a friendship with a few folks within in the Fort Myers, Florida area that um, had convinced me that they felt maybe I wasn't built for hospitality, and that, hey, you can have a job where you make a little bit more money, you get the weekends off, and they all seemed to be doing well and happy. And had just was getting ready to finish my master's degree at the time, and I was just, I was burnt out a little bit, and I went through the interview process for Gartner, where they all had worked, and I remember on that Friday morning was my final interview with Gartner, and I was supposed to start the job that I'd already accepted the following Tuesday back in San Diego. Um, Florida and San Diego are not close, and so I was going to have to start the drive from Florida to San
So
Diego.
you're driving.
I had to bring everything I owned,
Yeah.
so
Okay.
I was going to leave that Friday night to go back to San Diego if I didn't get the Gartner job. And the interview went well. They knew I needed an answer quickly, and they called with an offer. And I had to decide that day, should I take the safe road back to California, a long road back to California, and do what I knew, or step into something completely foreign? Corporate America was not something I was familiar with. IT research,
Right.
not something I was familiar with. I didn't know if it was a world I belonged in. I didn't know if I'd be successful. Um, but I knew the caliber of people that I was seeing that worked there, and I kind of knew what I was going to go back to, and it was just, God, is this why I've invested money in my education? Is this what I needed to do? And I ultimately took the Gartner offer. I was terrified, right?
Yeah.
I didn't know if I'd be good at it, like I said, but I knew that staying comfortable and just going back to the West Coast and running restaurants and bars wasn't going to take me anywhere, right? And so And that looking back, that decision kind of changed everything. I ended up with
Yeah.
an 8-year career at Gartner before Salesforce and my person, and now here with Anaplan, and it's been a really. I look back and I wonder a lot what would have happened if I had taken the other path. What would have
Yeah.
happened if I decided, yeah, I'm just going to go back and you know, just stay in this business and go back to the West Coast and live in California. Who knows? Become a surfer. I don't know what I was going to do, but it was that moment that I had to make, and I had to make that decision. I had to make that decision in the span of a couple of hours. And I
Wow.
ended up spending the Friday night instead of driving out and beginning the 38-hour drive. Um, I unpacked the truck and said, I'm going to be here for a while. And that was really probably the best decision I could have made looking back. And I have a lot of people to thank for it. I don't want to name them all because I'm afraid I'll forget somebody, but that was the moment that I think I had to really decide, what am I going to do? And thankful I made the decision that I did.
Yeah, that's an awesome stare down the bowl, actually. I love those ones where you're literally making a decision whether to stay somewhere, go somewhere, change careers completely. A few people have given those type of examples, and they're generally big. It's like, do I leave my country and go work at Bell Labs? Do I leave Bell Labs and go work at a startup? Do I leave Florida to go to California, or do I stay and go to Gartner? So that's like
I didn't have the
the
weekend to think about it.
you really didn't. You really didn't. So
Just to take
that
the
was a
next couple
big
hours and
deal.
decide what you're going to do.
That was yeah, that was a big decision, Jared. That was a really good share. Thank you. And I want to point out one thing. You said one thing earlier, and this is something that I bring up all the time. You had the training, the sales training at Gartner. This is why this podcast I think is so important for salespeople to hear people like yourself, because they don't really have that opportunity anywhere anymore. Like, we all came up through literal sales training. I went to Motorola. Other people that I know that did a really good job went to IBM sales training. You went to Gartner sales training. And I say this a lot in the podcast, and it's kind of unfair now because what happens is people come out of school, they go into a sales role, they learn product. They don't learn how to sell, which means we kind of have a generation of salespeople coming up that haven't had that really great tactical selling experience that we had, that training that we had at these companies. And that's a shame, but that's, to fill that gap a little bit, it's great to have people like you on the show who talk about different things with regards to selling and ways to be a great salesperson. So thank you for that as well, for coming on the show and doing that today. Just in closing, if you had to bet on the next decade of sales leaders, is it the loud, high energy type, or calm, steady operators who win the day, and why?
I, I think there's room for both.
Okay, fair.
Um, but as being the person that I am, I do feel the calm, steady operator that embraces technology and using technology to drive a team is going to own the day. I think the loud, high energy type can win. They can win a room,
Yep.
but I think they also, if there's not something behind that, they'll struggle when the room gets hard. And I think the next decade of enterprise sales is going to reward people who can navigate complexity, build real trust, be transparent, stay grounded when AI and market shifts create uncertainty. It's not a personality type you're born with, but it's does definitely one that you can build through experience. And I think
Yeah.
it starts with being able, or willing, maybe is a better way to say it, to do hard things before you're ready. And so I think there's room for both. The advice I would say is, like, whatever you are, just make sure it's your authentic self. Make
Yes.
sure it's who you are, because if you're one way and you're trying to be another, if you're an extrovert and you're more gregarious and you're trying to be calmer, then you're going to feel stifled, and that's not going to give the best version of yourself. And when you're um, an introvert, or where somebody's more of like have a more of a calm, quiet intensity, and you're being asked to be the other side, you're gonna
Yeah.
feel very uncomfortable and rushed, and you're not gonna be happy. And so you just have to be honest with yourself on who you are. And there's so many versions that are people of both where, and that's really kind of where I think I fall into play more often is like I'm not shy, right?
Right. No.
I could be in a room and be all those things, but when it comes down to like when that's done, I need some time to kind of come back and like get my thoughts together. And I think people just need to be honest with themselves about who they are and stick to it and embrace it. And if you're in a place where it's not embracing who you are and not embracing what you want to be, it may not be the right spot for you.
Hmm.
So it's hard to say who's going to dominate. I certainly would think somebody who's got, yeah, it's hard to say. It's hard to say.
Yeah.
People that are going to dominate are the people who are authentic
Yeah.
with themselves in the environment.
I think it's a great message and a wonderful way to end the show. So thank you so much for joining
Yes, it's
today,
fun.
Jared. It was so good to talk to you
Good to see
and
you. Yeah.
just an amazing amount of great information. Thank you. Thank you for listening to Stare Down the Ball. If today's conversation sparked new ideas, share it with a colleague and keep the momentum going. The future belongs to leaders who act, so subscribe and join us again next week.